Well, hey, this is Pastor Dan, and this is Eric Little Part 2. You may have noticed at the end of the first part, I wasn't quite sure how to end it because there was still one more story, and I felt like I was running a little long. But this story, I think, is really helpful because it shows how his faith in Jesus helped him be a good sport in the midst of competing against others. So, let me read the last chapter about Eric Little, and it's called The Flying Scotsman. He was from Scotland. In the 1920s, when Eric Little was racing for Scotland, there were no starting blocks at the starting line for runners. Instead, they dug a hole in the dirt with the toes of their shoes to help push off. Always full of good ideas, Eric kept a small trowel, a small shovel, handy to dig the holes for his toes. Instead of keeping the advantage to himself, however, he would pass the trowel down the line to his rivals so they could dig holes for their toes too. It was just the kind of man he was. What about you? If you had come up with that idea and you brought the shovel, do you think you would share it with the other competitors? Or would you have kept it to yourself? And why? What do you think was behind his desire to share his idea with others? Well, let's keep reading. A few weeks before the 1924 Olympics, Eric ran in a Scottish intervarsity race. The day was cool and a swift breeze was blowing. Eric noticed one of his competitors sitting beside the track in only a tank top and shirt, shivering. Taking off his blue uniform blazer, he draped it around the other student's shoulders and said kindly, "You must take care not to get too cold." Just before an international competition, Eric noticed a black runner standing off by himself while the other runners laughed and talked with one another. Leaving the group, Eric went over and he drew the loner into a friendly talk. One day, as Eric took his place on the inside track, the best position for a 440-yard race, he saw that the man who had drawn the outside track was not a strong runner. See, at that time, there was no staggering to make up for the curves. So if you ran on the outside, you had to run farther than 440 yards. Going over to the other runner, Eric asked if he could change places with him. He said, "I always feel happier on the outside," he grinned. Again, what would make him do that? He gave up a better position. He gave up an advantage in a race, in a competition, to someone else. Eric's courtesy to others even had a humorous side. When he went back to China as a missionary teacher, he continued to run races. To get to one event, he had to travel by ferry across the river from the city of Tientsin. The last ferry back left at 3. To Eric's dismay, he discovered that his race was at 2:30, leaving only a half an hour to get to the ferry. So he called a taxi. He asked the driver to wait with his motor running at the stadium gate. At 2:30, Eric ran his race, and he won. But as he broke the tape at the finish line, he just kept running for the gate. He jumped in the back of the cab, and meanwhile, the band was playing "God Save the King" for the winner. He, as he faded off, he dashed again to be brought to another halt as the band struck up La Marseillaise in honor of the Frenchman who'd come in. On his way to the taxi, they kept playing music, and he kept stopping before he could get in. Then he's finally in the taxi, which sped through the streets to the dock, only to arrive as the ferry's pulling away. Still, in his running clothes, Eric sprinted on the dock. He took a flying long jump over the 15-foot stretch of water, and he landed and fell in a heap on the deck. When the story got around to this amazing feat, he became known as the Flying Scotsman. Even though Eric was an Olympic champion, he never forgot that there were others who ran hard, ran fast, and ran well. Remembering his teammates and rivals who did not come in first, he said respectfully, "In the dust of defeat, as well as in the laurels of victory," the garland or the flowers that they would put on the victors, "there is glory to be found if one has done his best." Let me just read that again. In the dust of defeat, as well as in the laurels of victory, of winning, there is glory to be found if one has done his best. They write these words from Philippians 2:3. When you do things, don't let selfishness or pride be your guide. Instead, be humble and give more honor to others than to yourselves. So thinking about Philippians 2:3, how did Eric show honor to other competitors, to put them above himself? So it might be interesting to talk about with your parents or with your friends. What does it look like to be a Christian competitor? Whether your sports track, or maybe it's basketball or baseball or softball or any number of things. What does it look like to put others first, even as you play, and yet still be a competitor and still want to win? So I just thought that was really helpful, as Eric is one example of how he let his faith influence how he competed. So thanks for listening. I'd love to hear feedback if this is helpful to you. Um, if so, then I may find another hero of the faith and read another story to you soon. Thanks for listening.